So this is actually kind of shits and giggles. It's something really interesting. Has anybody heard of Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog?
Yes.
Yep.
No.
Awesome. Okay, so here's the deal. 2008, if I had thought about it ahead of time, I would have pulled up Joss Whedon's version of this. But in 2008, in the magical kingdom of Southern California, everybody was on strike. So the writer's strike of 2008, nothing was happening in Los Angeles, nobody was working. There are a lot of people who work in the industry, in the film industry, of course, who are not like bitter and jaded and all about money, but they actually are about like the artistry of creating something interesting and that sort of thing. And Joss Whedon is one of those people. He did the Buffy the Vampire series. He did
Dollhouse. Dollhouse.
Yeah, he did
Firefly.
Firefly, and he's done a whole bunch of those sorts of things. So he's kind of into these kind of weird, just slightly offbeat, social sort of weird, almost real irreality type shows where, you know, there's a vampire slayer and she's, you know, actually killing the vampires, which would be really nice. Oh, the vampire thing right now? Not so cool. Anyways, so in 2008, everybody was on strike, nobody was working, everybody was kind of sad, and here's Joss Whedon. Firefly had just been canceled, and he had no work. So he and his brother Jed, who is a musician, he writes music scores, they decided to get together with some friends and because they couldn't do anything on TV, everything was in reruns. Even if they went and did something, wrote something, produced it, because of the writer's strike, they wouldn't be allowed to air it on television. So what they decided to do was do an internet series called Dr. Horrible's Sing-Along Blog. And in Dr. Horrible's Sing-Along Blog, Dr. Horrible is our hero, but he is, in fact, an anti-hero. He is a villain. But, of course, the way he's presented to us as the hero. And he's, of course, in love with the girl, because it sits with that standard kind of storyline of boy meets girl, that sort of thing. And you know, in all the superhero stories, there's always a girl who's gonna, you know, flash her boobs and put the foil into the plans of the hero, and she kind of ends up being that person. And often she's the love interest of both the hero and the villain. And this is really, really standard, these tropes. And this is what's happening in this play. But it's a musical, and so what happens is, of course, we get Dr. Horrible is presented to us. We think he's the hero. We find out he's the villain, or he's a wannabe villain, who's in love with a girl. And then they kind of go on, and then the hero, Captain Hammer, and the fists are not the hammers. His penis is the hammer, and he's very clear about this, which is kind of bizarre, but you know, whatever. So he, Captain Hammer gets the girl, and then, of course, Dr. Horrible, in his attempt to get into the evil league of evil, he decides he's going to kill Captain Hammer, and inadvertently, you know, of course, it's not going to be a superhero story if the superheroes all die at the end, so he inadvertently doesn't kill Captain Hammer. What's really interesting is the way these characters are presented musically. Musically, we almost want to believe that Captain Hammer is going to be the good guy. Musically, he's presented as the good guy. Musically, you know, Dr. Horrible is presented somewhat as a bad guy. And Penny, the love interest, is flat. I mean, she's the typical, you know, girl in a superhero story, when she's not actually the superhero, in that she sings, she's so flat, her melody stays the same. Every song she sings carries a similar or same melody. But what's also interesting is how these relationships intersect musically, in that she and Captain Hammer are together. Musically, Captain Hammer and Penny don't mesh at all. Their lines don't kind of, they don't meet. They're always singing about different things when in the 3 very small moments in which they sing together. Whereas Dr. Horrible and Penny actually have several duets. There are 4 or 5 of them. Some of them fairly long, 35, 45 seconds in length. And they're complimentary, they're conversational, even though they're in separate rooms. They're following that same sort of a musical thing. But this is the villain, so you want to hate him because he wants to be in the evil league of evil, which is run by a character named Bad Horse, my apologies. There's some other really interesting character names, some really interesting tropes that are really played with. Joss Whedon does a very good job of putting in these little digs at little things. There are other off-scene, like characters we don't see. Conflict Diamond is one character in the Henchman's Union, as is Bait and Switch, another character in the Henchman's Union that we don't meet. The Pink Pummeler is a guy dressed all in pink. And he's actually in a bedroom on the phone waiting for Dr. Horrible. He wants Dr. Horrible to answer the phone. That's actually a dig at Neil Patrick Harris himself, because Dr. Horrible is played by Neil Patrick Harris, and as we all know, Neil Patrick Harris had a very public outing, and he and his partner just had a baby, twins. They said twins, so it's kind of one of those little things. There's a couple of digs at Neil Patrick Harris's sexuality, and there's a couple of digs at just these little things that happen. The actual, it's in 3 chapters, it's a serial. It is about 40 minutes long, but essentially that was kind of like what I was going to talk about, is just, we could probably watch bits and pieces and kind of just pick it apart, because I'm at the beginning of looking into this particular work as a potential paper for Music and the Moving Image in New York next year. So it's something I'd like to start working on, but of course, right now I'm still writing about Skittles advertisements for my thesis. So, but anyway, which is something completely different. That's next month. This is, and it's interesting the way the music just plays along. As you go farther into it, hopefully, I don't know. We'll see if we can watch something. How varied and Dr. Horrible is as a character. He's got a lot of depth to him. There are a lot of layers. He's told that the only way to get into the evil league of evil is to kill somebody. Now he has to assassinate somebody. And he's like, I don't want to kill somebody. But he wants to be an evil hero or an evil villain and that sort of thing. So he's got a lot of layers. His music reflects that. Penny, really flat. Her music reflects that. Captain Hammer, well, he's just important, interesting guy played by Nathan Fillion, who's just really, really funny. So there's a couple of really cool things. At least we can watch the first chapter. It's about 13 minutes long. So.